So I'll start with like, okay, guys, awesome. Yes, we are live, guys, and today I'm having a conversation with Ryan Hawk, who is the host of the Learning Leaders Show, a podcast that is absolutely dedicated to helping managers becoming excellent leaders. And I have to tell you guys, it was the very first podcast that I listened in my life. It was very first when Kieran told me, hey, you should check out podcasting, go and check some leadership thing. I typed it. And Ryan, the name of your show caught my attention as an athlete as well, as a former athlete. And I just hooked up with it so much. You've introduced me to so many leaders, so many. Like if you look at this bookshelf behind me, most of them comes from your podcast. I was like, I need to have that book. I need to learn that. So that's how I get to know Ryan. And he released last year a book that, in my opinion, it's an absolute must read for everyone who's into management, who's transitioning to management, but also whilst you're figuring out how to be a better leader. And the book is called Welcome to Management. So that will be the conversation today. But first and foremost, Ryan, thank you very much for being so generous with your time and sharing it with me and my audience.
I really appreciate that intro and your prep, man. It's I'm just happy to be here and get the opportunity to talk with you and learn a little bit about what you've learned through your process. And I'll do my best to share the things that I've learned. So hopefully we can help some people.
Wow, incredible. So I would miss the opportunity if I wouldn't ask you the question that I was always waiting for the guest to answer it for you. And that is when you're asking your guests about the common characteristics that of leaders that have achieved and sustained the excellence over the extended period of time. And I'm curious to hear what other characteristics for you are today.
Wow. Well, thank you. That is one of my favorite questions, is to see the thoughts behind leaders and what they feel are the common traits, behaviors, characteristics of those who have sustained excellence over an extended period of time. I guess if I had to name a few, what I've found through now 6 years of asking that question to over 400 people, first of all, they're thoughtful and reflective. So they're willing to press pause. They're willing to think. They're willing to analyze what happened, why did it happen, and how can I best respond. And then two, they are purposeful and intentional with their actions and reactions to those moments. So they don't haphazardly wander through life, crossing their fingers, just hoping for the best. They are thoughtful about what's going on, what they're going to do, and then they're intentional and purposeful in the action that they take. So it doesn't mean they're not spontaneous or they're not up for a fun time here and there, but it does mean that they are they have intention and purpose behind what they do. And then third, I would say that they have a bias for action. So while I believe that curiosity and humility are really great traits in a person, you can't just sit in the corner and take notes all day. At some point, you got to take action. You know, the Wright brothers from over here where I'm from, and I'm in Dayton, Ohio here in the States, and that's where they're from. That's where they grew up, just down the street from where I live. And these guys are notorious for regularly spending time down in North Carolina here in the States, standing on sand dunes and watching birds fly. They literally would watch their wings and see how they'd soar and dip. And the purpose behind that was for them to then go and really work on building the wings of their airplane, the first flying machine. And so they oscillated really well between being thoughtful and reflective, and then they would immediately go and get on the plane and they would take test flights. And so they had a bias for action. I found those same three traits seem to be in common with people who are making it happen consistently over an extended period of time with excellence, of being thoughtful, reflective, right, having purpose and intention, and then a bias for taking action, not just sitting back and waiting for things to happen, but going and making things happen themselves. I think if you have those things together, you have a good shot.
Yeah, I think in this age we are blessed with internet, but that abundance of information can work against us, because it's so easy to read another article, to listen to another podcast and make some notes, buy more books and read more books, but you don't put it into action. And you've mentioned that's 6 years of interviewing, 400, I think 16 episodes are out. what I'm curious now really is, if I take you back to the time when you transitioned between being an athlete and that conversation that you had with Jennifer about, her husband that was cheating on her, what would be the answer for you then if somebody asked you the same question? Would it be different? Would it be the same?
As far as asked what question?
About the sustained level of excellence. What
Oh
does it take
gosh,
to be?
I wonder. I don't even know if I would have had an answer for them at that time. I mean, I probably would have said really basic tropes like work really hard, which is true,
Yeah.
but really basic thoughts that without much put into it. I mean, my mentality at that age was I don't think I'm as smart as most of these people, so I'm just going to try to outwork them. And certainly that has its place. I mean, that helped me out, but there wasn't much more to it other than I'm going to grind myself to a pulp, just trying to outwork people. The thing that I think could be a problem there is I'm not sure how sustainable it is to just work more hours than everybody else and just get in there early and work super late, especially if you want to have a family and you want to have a life outside of your job, which in my early days, it didn't really matter. I didn't have anything else really going on. And so I could do that, but I don't know how sustainable that is as you develop friends and a spouse and a family. It just isn't as realistic. I don't think, at least not for me in the life that I want to live, to work 12, 15 hours a day because you're not talented enough to achieve the numbers you want to achieve by just working a normal 8-hour day like people do here. So that I'd probably just really focus on outworking people as a mode of excellence, even though that's not necessarily the sustaining part of excellence.
Yeah, I totally resonate with it, because when I first started into management, I also transitioned from being an athlete to being an employee and manager, and I had the same mindset. I'll bring my grit, my resilience, my hard work ethic, and then focus on growth, and I'll take everyone on my journey. And you've mentioned it's not sustainable with your family in your life, but it's also not sustainable what I've learned, and I failed on that as well for my team, because not everyone is ready for that level of intensity, and it creates more harm, and the relationship between you and people are being tarnished because of that. I probably would answer the same with you. Just work hard, focus on your growth, and do your best every single day. But there's a price to it that you're paying, and people around you as well. Right. And
what sports did you play?
Freestyle wrestling. So
freestyle wrestling?
Freestyle wrestling, yes.
Wow, what is that?
So the question that in the UK, when I say I'm a wrestler, people look at me strangely normally, because first, I don't resemble wrestler. I'm tiny.
But there are weight classes, yeah.
Yeah, then I think about WWE type of wrestling, and it's not what it is. It's one of the oldest sports, like Olympic wrestling. And I'm guessing loads of people are watching now UFC and MMA fights, and they're doing those takedowns. That's wrestling. And so
that's what all those medals are from wrestling?
Yes. This is my my reminder of what got me to who I am today.
Wow. So what was your wrestling career like? Like, where did it, how long did you do it for? When did it stop? Why did it stop?
Yeah. So I started at the age of 10.
Okay.
Because it was just something to do. I was always the tiniest and the smallest person around, underweight and undernutrition and all that stuffs. And I just did it because there was something to do in my neighborhood, and I just stuck with it, and I'm so grateful that I did. And I competed for 14 years on international level with different level of success. I never qualified for Olympic Games though, but let's say I was always in top 3 in my country.
In your country?
Yes.
Wow. Okay.
And yeah, so there is some level of success, but the biggest one is the mindset, the athlete-like mindset that I developed through it. And you asked me, why did I stop? Well, the short answer is it's because it's not football, it's not soccer. It doesn't pay the bills the same way that it does in any other sport. So in the UK, when I came back to being a wrestler, I became a British champion, but I was paying into it to go for the competition, to buy the equipment, for the entry fee and all that things. And so it wasn't sustainable. I had a full-time job and practice and then compete. So no, I no longer compete though, but you know how is it with the athlete, it's there. It's the whole point is what I'm doing as a feedback coach and as a podcaster. It's all because of the sport.
Yeah. Where did you live, and then where are you from, and where do you live now?
So originally I'm from Poland,
Poland. Okay.
and I moved to the UK 6 June 2006.
Okay.
And so it was a break in between with my sport, and I discovered there's a wrestling club around me here as well. So I just got back into it for a few years.
Okay.
So that's my journey with.
Oh, that's cool. I'm gonna have to connect with you after this to talk to me about like whenever we're allowed again to design my like a cool European trip. I really want. I went with my wife through Venice and Slovenia and Croatia before the pandemic, and I want to do something like that again. Maybe you can help me out with that. Side note.
Most certainly.
I've heard Poland is an incredible country to go to. I've never been.
It is. We're blessed with 4 seasons, and there's some sea, there's mountains. It's like all around it. Everything is there. Yeah, depending what you're looking for, whether it's wintertime, summertime.
Do you go back much, or are you mainly in the UK? Like where?
Not that much anymore. I'm settled here with my family, so my time.
Cool. Sorry, I don't want to hijack your thing. But if you let me, I'll just ask all these. I am fascinated by Europe and spending more time there, and I'm looking forward to getting a chance to do it again. So I don't want to get off topic though. Sorry.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I like this conversation. Where it goes. So yeah, that's the transition between being an athlete and management. It fascinates me because I've been through it, and you've been as well. Mm-hmm. And there are some things that we could take and learn as we move forward to it. But when you moved, so like when I grabbed your book, mm-hmm. I bought it because you've earned the credibility, Ryan. I knew it's going to be a good one because through your podcast, I was like, this is going to be a good one. I bought it. I've opened it. And then I realized how good it is as soon as I've seen the 3 parts, the lead yourself, build your team, lead your team. Mm-hmm. And the reason, guys, why I loved it so much and I like it and I would like to explore it here with you, Ryan, is because most of the leadership training, management training that we've been given, or even the books out there are focused on the last part, how to lead your team. And quite rightly in your book, it's the last part because it genuinely is. There are things beforehand that you have to do before you move into leading your team. And you kicked off with lead yourself. And I've got a feeling that behind every tip that I give there is a story. I'm curious to hear what led you to discover that it's so important to first lead yourself and work on yourself.
Well, you found the exact same thing that I feel like I did when studying and reading about leadership, is the fact that we're not focusing necessarily on the right things in the right order. I have yet to work with a leader who was really effective, who wasn't constantly working on bettering themselves. The purpose of the name of my show, The Learning Leader Show, is because my favorite leaders in my life were leaders who constantly were striving to improve themselves. Because as a leader, like we have to remember, we're the model for mm-hmm. all others see, whether it's as a husband in my case, or a dad, or at work. I don't feel I'm not really going to respect and want to follow somebody if I don't see them really working hard on themselves. And so you've got to lead yourself first before you could lead anybody else. There are plenty of the, put your oxygen mask on first type of metaphors out there when it comes to flying on a plane. And there's a reason that those exist is that's because I believe they're true. Mm-hmm. But like I would ask everybody right now, envision the most effective leaders you've ever been around in your mind. Like think of an actual person or two. Mm-hmm. Now, what were their daily actions like? What were your interactions with them like? What were they working on? I would imagine the best ones, the ones you really respected, the ones that you really wanted to follow, the ones that you really wanted to work with, I would venture to guess they worked on themselves a lot. And I know in my case, all of my favorite leaders constantly a work in progress, constantly working on bettering themselves with the intent and the hope to then help other people. And so it's in that order and written in that order for a very specific reason. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just like, oh, let's just try this out. No, we really worked on, I say we, when me writing and the editing team who helped me, we really did that for that reason, because if nothing else, if people started it and they, for whatever reason, couldn't finish it, I wanted them to get that lead yourself first. And so that's why it's written in the way that it is. And I'm glad that you saw it that way too, because that was intentional.
Yes, it's and it's also linked with my own lessons as well. That I thought, although I'm growth obsessed because of my background as an athlete, I thought I can just copy and paste and just move on. And later down the line, I realized it's just not the way. I need to be more intentional, deliberate, as you've mentioned with it, with really being selective and picking things that work, that doesn't tweak, adjust, contextualize before I apply, because it's just not everything works. And management life, it just throws the curveball at you from every single corner that you just wouldn't even expect. You've mentioned the story about when Jennifer told you that her husband is cheating on her, and you like, what, like, what's next then, right? And so the self-awareness, the first part that really resonated with me, struck with me the most from that part, because wow, my life has changed since I discovered Tasha Urich, thanks to you, read the book, and then start practicing self-awareness. Is just such an incredible skill. So
which book? I'm sorry.
Dr. Tasha Urich, The Insights.
Oh, Tasha Urich. Okay, yeah. Sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Incredible book.
Yeah,
one of those books that I always recommend to everyone. I just came across it thanks to interview that you've done with her. So let's just pause for a second on self-awareness. What are the steps, and where do we start with sort of self-awareness? Let's just start differently. What makes self-awareness so important as a skill to work on?
So again, let's envision a leader or a boss or a person who had a title above yours that you've ever worked with in the past, and think of the ones that had high levels of awareness of self, where they fully understood themselves, their strengths, their weaknesses, how they come across, and their and the messaging that they deliver, both written and verbally, the way that message is received, the ability to be empathetic and put yourself in the other person's shoes. Like, that's high levels of awareness. Then let's think of the person who didn't have any of those traits or any of those skills that we've worked with, and think about how much you enjoyed working with those completely diametrically opposed people. So understanding self, having a comfort in your skin, knowing what you stand for, knowing what you believe, knowing how the perception of you, all of that is really important, because perception becomes reality. So
Yes.
as a leader, if I think that you're not very good, well, that's my reality of you. You got to work on that, and we got to work together. Well, I think it's as Tasha states in her work, basically everyone thinks they have a high level of self-awareness, and most people are wrong. So it's just having that knowledge that, like, to me, sometimes it can be harmful, because I'm constantly questioning everything about myself. Well, at times you just got to kind of go with it. But I think that's because I so badly don't want to be not aware of what's going on, that I'm regularly questioning myself and questioning things going on. And so I think that's really important. Now, getting to the second part, I think, of what you're discussing, which is how can we increase our levels of self-awareness? I think this all depends upon your peer group. It depends upon your who. Who are you surrounding yourself with? Who are your friends? Who are your colleagues? Who is your spouse? Who are your mentors? Who are you helping, right? The complete 360 of people around you, making sure you're surrounded by people with high levels of intelligence, high levels of trust, high levels of willingness, as you're full well, of giving honest, candid, useful feedback. Who are the people that you're surrounding yourself with that are able and willing, two different things, to do that for you, so that they can say, hey man, what in the world are you doing with that? Or, hey, when you led that meeting and you said this part for the first 5 minutes and people were a little bit scared to give you feedback, I'm giving it to you now. That did not play well. That did not go well. You got to fix this, right? Having those people to help me, that helps me understand, oh, I must have made a mistake that I didn't even realize it. And now, because I have those people to tell me, it increases my level of awareness and how I'm perceived by others. So I think it's being very intentional about your who, about the people you surround yourself with, and you doing the same for them. So you can provide each other feedback to help one another, to say, this is how you're coming across. It may not seem like it, but I'm telling you, this is how it is from the other person's perspective. I love and crave that type of feedback. And the friends and colleagues and mentors who are willing and able to provide that for me, I treat them like gold. I mean, they are so valuable that I'm always looking to have those people in my life and try my best to do the same for them. So these are mutually beneficial, good relationships with others so that we can increase our levels of awareness.
You've mentioned the people that are able and willing, which is two different things here. And wow, you're so right. And you even told the story in your book about, as an employee, you had peers and colleagues that were sharing with you, feedback with you. They understood that what you need, who you are as an individual, as a person. You've built the relationship. The feedback was coming your way. You were growing. You move into management and things just change. And I think we've all been in a situation when we're moving into management, especially the higher you go, the less feedback it's actually coming our way, which is crucial. How you build the people around you and the teams. And you speak in the part number 2, the who part, the power of who and who you bring in on team. And this is something that I failed in my first few years, because there's this strange tendency that as soon as you become the manager, I think the employers are assuming that you know how to interview people, how to bring people on board, because you're supposed to. And I was like yourself, I was a grafter in my work. I would just work hard, and my background is hospitality. So I would say, hey, come work with me, and then I assess in action. I just didn't know how to bring the right people with the right characteristic traits into my business, so then they can support me and I can support them. So how would we go around building our team a little bit better and with more mindfulness and intention again?
Yeah, great question. So I, just like you, completely messed this up. I actually got super lucky early on by just stumbling into some incredible hires. But once I got a little bit better and learned from this, let's say from an interviewing and team building perspective, I had no idea what I was doing. And so I had the person that I used to work for, I said, hey, I'm interviewing people. I don't even know what to ask them. What should I do? And he clicked forward on an email that was forwarded to him by a manager for like 5 years before. And it was just a bunch of random questions about, whatever, working hard and it doesn't matter. There was no purpose behind the questions. There were no qualities I was looking for. I was just asking questions. Some of them were like even brain teaser ones, which was really stupid, just to like make me feel smart and make them feel dumb, I guess. I don't know. I didn't even know what I was asking. What I eventually changed, although it took years, was really work on identifying what does excellence look like in this role that I'm interviewing for? What is the makeup of an excellent performer? And the type of person that I want to have, the must-have qualities that I have to have. So do the hard work, whether it's with your mentors or colleagues or friends, of really listing out, what do we want? What is success? What is excellence in this job? What are the characteristics, the qualities, the behaviors, the actions of those people? So we get that documented first. Next, we design our interview process to uncover if they have and they possess these qualities and the behaviors, the action-oriented, example-based questions to prove that they have these types of qualities that we're looking for, whatever it is, whatever the job is, so that you go into the process with intention and purpose, as opposed to just asking random questions and then going on a gut instinct and hoping for the best. No, we're going to actually systematize this. There's going to be purpose behind every question, and they're all going to tie back to these qualities and behaviors that we really want, that we think we need in order for us to do, for them to do well in this job. And that way you increase your odds of making really good hires, as opposed to just getting lucky every once in a while like I have to do. So that's the part I really learned, is that when I go and work with leaders at times, I'll say, so what are you looking for? And a lot of times that will be the first time they've thought of that the answers to those questions, and they're making it up on the spot. And sometimes they're looking for, some of them are like, oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But what I learned then at that moment is, wait, you haven't documented this. And if you haven't documented this, then what questions are you asking? And how are you tying those questions to the qualities that you want in a person? And you find that most people just kind of go on gut instinct instead of having a process in place. And I found the companies and the leaders who are sustaining excellence, they clearly know what they're looking for, and they clearly have a process in place to find what they're looking for. And they're not going to they're not going to get 100% of it right. Nobody ever does, but their odds are significantly higher than the people who are just hoping for the best and wandering through the interview process.
Yes, and the other upside of that, listing those behaviors that you're looking for, is that you can also look for behaviors before the application and right after it. Because if you really start looking for certain behaviors, you can see it. If somebody tells you, hey, I'm really comfortable with sharing feedback, for instance, and then they finish interviewing process and they wouldn't provide you a feedback, then they're not supporting you. But imagine somebody tells it during the interview and goes back home, and writes the email or gets the phone and just records himself and, hey, Ryan, you interviewed me and you spoke about this is important for you in that value, but you haven't really, demonstrated in that specific time and place. Now think about what that tells you about the person, right? You can really then start looking even for those smaller actions as well and start connecting those dots and increasing your odds, as you mentioned, with hiring.
Yeah, I love it. So you said you initially made mistakes. How did you improve? Like what was it that was there an inflection point or a moment or a mentor that helped you improve in that process?
It was a mentor.
Really? What happened?
It's a gentleman whose comment is in here now. Actually, it's Kieran.
Oh, cool.
He took me under his wings at the time that was very vulnerable and difficult for me. And he really helped me to grow. So I'm a great advocate of looking for mentors because I know that one person is enough to change your life. And Kieran is the individual who changed my life and transformed it completely. He saw my potential and just took it to the completely new level. But what he did with the interviewing process for me is he said, hey, come and join me in the interview. You don't have to ask questions. Just sit, relax. And if you feel like ask it. And so he would lead the interview. I would just watch it and kind of contribute a little bit. And then we sit down and he would ask me questions. What was my feeling? What have I discovered through it, and what questions I could ask, and what did I get from that answer? So I asked this question: what did you get when that person answered to you? So kind of like guiding me to connecting those dots. So Ryan explained this process. What did you get from it? How does it connect with our value? What we're looking for? And then so the next interview, he would just go with me again, and it was like ask more questions. Now I'm starting asking questions, and then eventually both of us switching in and out. And then we turn into the next level when he would observe him or the candidate and myself and give me feedback. And then, from the body language perspective, from all those sort of things. And eventually, then he would just sit back and I would lead it. And by the time I knew how to interview people. But we didn't stop there. We then got every single supervisor, team leader, manager in our restaurant through the same process. So if I knew I'm interviewing someone, I was like, oh, Anka, what are you doing? You have 15 minutes spare. I'm doing this interview on that day. Join me. Just listen and see how it goes for you. How does it feel for you like on the other end? And that was the whole process behind it. By the time I knew, I was so comfortable with interviewing. It was fun from dreading it and making wrong decisions to be as educated, make those educated guesses as much as possible because you've mentioned it. You don't always get it right? But you're increasing the likelihood of that and feeling comfortable with it, have fun with it, most important, and being able to pass it on. I was years into management until somebody actually did it for me. So years of expecting me of doing so, and years later somebody just sat me down and got me through the process.
Doesn't that really motivate you and inspire you to want to be that person for others?
Like genuinely, the whole idea behind this podcast and everything that I do is because of that. Is because I genuinely believe that every person that goes into management has this passion, desire to change the world. But then, as you mentioned in your book, it just clashes with the reality. We think management is easy. It actually isn't. And then what do? Well, if nobody guides you, you refer back to what's available. And that is authority, the job title. And that's when things go wrong. And by the time you're becoming a leader that you promise yourself never to be one. Right? So it inspires you. I always say that one coaching leader is enough to change your life. Hence the name coaching leaders, because that one leader can change so many different lives if you have that person.
So from a feedback perspective, I know this is what you mainly do. What about both sides of it? So I would be curious from all of your experience now, maybe to get one tip on both giving feedback to others as well as being someone who's good at receiving feedback in order to better ourselves? Like, is there one on each side that really pops to your mind?
Yeah. So in terms of giving feedback, I'll go with something that really resonate with me in your book as well. Is how well do you know your people,
Yeah.
and connect your feedback with that. So to give you a bit more context, if you really listen to what feedback says, you've mentioned in your book as well, words really matter. Everything matters. To me, it's like passive feedback. It sends certain message. Most of the feedback in the workplace sounds like this. You need to work harder because it's your job. You need to work harder because I'm telling you, or my boss is being down my neck, or it's your goals, or we are behind you, whatever client needs it. Extrinsic. If you tell your employees, hey, you need to work a little bit harder because that's your goal, I know who you want to become in the future, then it's like there's a lot more action behind it. They are invested emotionally behind it because they work for themselves, because they work on themselves. So that's focus on the intrinsic level. So find out what they want to be. They may not want to be a manager. They want to be a great husband, fantastic, great partner, incredible. I'll help you with that. We're going to work on impulse control. We're going to work on your self-awareness. So my background is hospitality. And I always say, hey, I don't teach my door hosts how to seat people in the restaurant. That's extrinsic. And, they are students most likely that want to do something else in their life. But you know what? I'm going to teach you one skill. And that skill is to say no when people wants to tell you yes, that you give them yes. Because that queue in the restaurant isn't patient. They want things now. They're demanding. So I'll help you manage that process. So I'll give you feedback for those skills. Being door host happens to be, it's a perfect coaching playground here. So turn it around. Don't focus extrinsically on what job needs to, what's the job requirement. So you call it coaching for performance, coaching for development, right? Focus more on development and then connect it back to the performance and find the bridge. So bring people emotionally through focusing on development, and use that performance, what you do, as an opportunity to practice the playground. You know that what you've mentioned, record yourself before the meetings and hear yourself.
Yeah.
That's your coaching opportunity. The playground is here. So do that. Focus your feedback on extrinsic motivators rather than intrinsic. So that would be quite long actually answer, but you just hit the red button and I can talk about it.
Yeah.
For giving feedback. And on the receiving end, we are confusing feedback with our identity. We are attaching it immediately to our identity rather than to the performance at a given place and time. The feedback is about our skills in a given place and time. Right now, right here, I talk too fast whilst I'm interviewing. So for those of you who are listening right now, if you compare the pace of talk between me and Ryan, there is a huge difference, right? And for some, because of my accent, perhaps, it could be that I talk too fast. When you get me excited, I take it to the next level.
Yeah.
Right. So if you give me a feedback on that, it's not that I'm a bad host or I can't be a good interviewing person. It's just right now I just talk too fast for some people. That's all it is. But we're getting confused, and the story in our head is I am not, or I am ... It isn't. Just reverse the story, control the story in your head, and tell the story to yourself about the skill. It's really important what you verbalize internally. The story has to be about the skill, not about you and yourself.
Yeah, I love that. So when somebody tells you that or they give you that feedback, how do you feel?
Majority of the time, I'm over the moon. First of all, I'm grateful that they're courageous enough to give it to me, because it's not always granted. People don't. We all want feedback because we want to grow, but not everyone is willing to give it because we tend to play safe when it comes to feedback. We don't want to upset you, so to play safe, I just withhold it back. By withholding back, you manipulate with people's growth and emotional well-being. You keep them in the dark, basically. However, when I get that feedback, first of all, I'm grateful, and I immediately see it as opportunity to grow. It's not easy to do it. It takes months, years even, to get to that position when you start associate every single feedback with the growth. When you see feedback, you hear growth. Oh, I'll get better. Oh, you just helped me become a better person, a better podcast host, a better coach, a better leader. Therefore, I can help more to others. So kind of like when you attach it to your skills and to your cause, it's a lot easier all of a sudden. I just feel grateful and happy.
I think though that's an advanced skill. Like how are you able to do that? Because I think most people their feelings might be hurt, or they take offense, or they get upset, or they even get down on themselves. I'm not bulletproof to this either. At times I've gotten feedback that's helpful, that's really good, it's all true, and I still maybe get my feelings hurt a bit, even though I'm still grateful for it and I'm gonna improve. But every once in a while you get defensive, or so how have you like broken through that part of it?
Yeah. So there are two parts of it. One you've already mentioned is being reflective, but that's later on. The pain, it's in the real time. That's when you have to really focus. And we also spoke already about self-awareness. So my advice to that is always focus on the story in the real time. What is it? And if your story is starting with discrediting the feedback, discrediting the person or the intention, right, then you're more likely to trigger the chain of conversations with yourself that will lead you to deflecting the feedback, to feeling bad about yourself, because you're focusing on something that is negative. And it really starts with the first thought that is in your mind, because then you will follow it more likely. And it's like cookies on your phone. You type one thing, and then just basically just keeps on feeding you the same thing. The answer just keeps on coming because they are related to your first Google search, right? The same thing happens in our mind. So practice catching yourself in the real time. What are your thoughts when you hear feedback? So one phrase that I realize I'm repeating often is, what do you mean? So if you catch yourself saying, what do you mean, then you're more likely going to deflect either feedback or discredit the person and focus it on the negative side. So the what do you mean for me is a trigger to go, what do you mean this? You don't know all the story. What do you mean? You're not being fair with me. Right? This is kind of like the self-awareness part plays really a lot here.
What about okay, I don't mean it. And again, I'll stop and let you get back to the script in a second, or there's no script. You asking questions, but how about for the people who criticize you, whether they write a negative Amazon review for your book, which anyone who writes a book, if people read it, you're going to get negative reviews, or negative review of your podcast, or they send you an email and they're really critical, and maybe you think that person doesn't know what they're talking about. Like, for example, one of the negative reviews I read on Amazon recently was, this guy, I don't care for his sports background, right? Which to me, I immediately get defensive and say, well, that's my life. You're telling me you don't care about my life. And I get really upset, because sports were, for a period of my life, a massive part of my life. So when they say that's stupid that he writes about sports, well, that'd be like me saying, well, that's stupid that you write about your life, you know? And so I'm wondering, but that's me getting defensive. So I'm wondering, when you hear that, what do you think of that?
Because it sounds like sport it's a huge part of your life.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And that's when your first story really starts. So the curiosity is another part that you've mentioned, right? It's about rewiring yourself and focusing on being a bit more curious. What led him to think that way? Who was your mentor? Did you have even a mentor? Who was leading you up to that point that you are so quick to criticize me for it? So is the balance between where's the conversation in your mind goes? Is it curious about what led that person to say these things, or you quickly attaching it to your identity? What you've done is you're attaching the feedback with your identity.
Right.
It's not about your identity.
That reminds me of Liz Weissman. I don't know if I've had her on years ago, and Liz is awesome. She wrote Ricky Smart's Multipliers, and she told me, I remember, instead of getting really mad when you have a bad boss or bad feedback or whatever, instead get curious about, well, I wonder what made that person that way. And
that's exactly it.
When you get curious about and ask that question, it changes the way, it could potentially change the way you think, as you said, and not make it just all about me and my identity, and then making like not liking me, and more about, I wonder, maybe they had a bad experience with sports, or maybe they just don't care for sports. And so at that point, they teed off on an Amazon review. It's an anonymous one, but I think that part could be much better for people, because as my dad told my brothers and me when we were really young, if you choose to do anything of significance in your life and make some sort of a dent in the world, whether it's in sports or something else, people are going to write stories and they're going to speak about you. And there'll be times where they'll praise you like you're the greatest thing in the world. And there'll be times where they'll criticize you and call you bad names. If you choose to do something of significance, you can't ever get too high by the praise or too low by the criticism. You got to stay even keeled if you want to keep going in this direction. And I remembered that from a young age, like, hey, I've chosen to try to do something of significance, whether it was on the field or now off the field. You got to be able to take it, both the compliments and the praise, without getting too big of an ego and a head about it, and as well as the negative reviews and the negative comments, and get too down and let that paralyze me from acting. I think that goes along as well as what you're talking about when it comes to feedback and just what you're hearing from others. It's really important to think about.
Curiosity helped me with stop being as judgmental. I think we can't fully eradicate that. We are judgmental by nature, but curiosity helped me really interrupt that pattern of judging people and quickly putting a label on them. You rightly mentioned that person may not be into sports, might have some bad experience, could not connect those dots between A and B, and then see the storytelling behind it, and so on and so forth. And so there could be so many different reasons, but by being curious, you're not taking it as personally. You're not taking it, your emotions will not arise as much as in that particular example. But what I would say is there is ill advice out there that says just ignore it, ignore the naysayers, ignore the people that are negative. It doesn't matter, it's insignificant, don't lose sleep over it. I think there is a danger here with sharing advice like that, because to me personally, that's opportunity to practice your self-awareness. So if you want to practice your self-awareness, go on social media. There will be some content, there will be some comments, there are going to be some topics, pro against vaccines, for instance, right? You've got Democrats, and you can pick up any topic, one you're attached to, the other one that isn't, and that's your opportunity to practice your self-awareness, your judgment, your impulse control, if you will. So for me, I'm grateful that I have this feedback, because I just had opportunity to see how self-aware I am in the moment, and what does it take me, and when, in which particular moment I'm more likely to be on my back foot and less likely. So what I'm hearing here in this instance is, if somebody is talking about my sporting background and is criticizing me, then it's likely that my emotions will be turned up. So if I'm having a conversation ahead with somebody who's more likely to criticize me, or I can see the conversation going in that way, that's my red button. That's why that's like, oh, I might lose my cool soon. I need to, I can't go 40 miles, 60 miles an hour. I need to cruise.
Preparing yourself before it happens, so that when and if it does, you respond better. Because life is really about, there's the stimulus, right, and then there's the buffer between the stimulus and your response, and you have to prepare yourself to manage how you're going to choose to respond, because then that will determine the outcome. And it's really about the power we have is in how we choose to respond. We don't get to choose the stimulus or the event or the inflection point. We do get to choose how we respond, and that choice, I think, then it makes all the world of a difference in the outcome of what then actually ends up happening. So I think it's really good feedback, really good advice.
It's, starting with being reflective. Okay, I've overreacted when I read about the sport. My example, when I realized that, was I had this moment in my working career that I was working hard on my self-awareness and being better leader and present. And within the space of a month, I've overreacted several times with my employees, and I was like, this is not what I'm standing for, this is not who I am. What has changed? And I started really being curious with, why have I literally exploded in one occasion? And I realized there's a common thread there, and that is when people at the very young age, about 18, 19, 20 years old, when they act like they know everything, and they act like I perceive it disrespectful, I can't control myself. That between the stimulus and our reaction, I don't get to choose yet. I go too quick. In a moment, it's not a choice. It's a button, and I just go off the rail. And I was like, oh, now that I know what that is, what I need to do is, knowing if I go to the conversation with younger people around that age, I can't go into this conversation 60 miles an hour. I need to be cruising 20. If the same words were said by you, we are roughly the same age, and I respect you, and there's loads of experience in your life, I wouldn't blown away. I know that. I've been through the situation, and that's cool. That's your experience. But I had this thing a few years ago, when if somebody around that age would tell me the same thing, and they act like they know more, I didn't get to choose. I just exploded. So I was like, okay, next time I'll slow down. And by going several times through those conversations, then you develop the skill to choose in that particular situation, and then you can just read those reviews like, oh, he doesn't like the sport, I'm wondering why, rather than what are you talking about, what do you
Right.
mean.
Like you said, curiosity is really the opposite of judgmental, or being a judgmental person. I like that a lot. Like, instead of being like walking into the room and judging them, get curious. I mean, one of our presidents, Abraham Lincoln, said, famously quoted, it is, quote, "I don't like that man, comma, I must get to know him better." So basically, the reason I don't like him is because that means I need to get curious, because if so, it gives me a chance to then potentially like him. And I think I like thinking about that when it comes to maybe something you get defensive or upset about, is I must get to know that person better. Let's be curious about them and their story and their background, because
Yes.
all of us, as you know, we're simply the sum of our experiences in life, and we all have unique and personal experiences that we've gone through with our families, with our schooling and education and the sports and whatever that we've gotten into. It is cool for me, and part of the reason why I love having a podcast is getting to dig in and learn about and understand the stories of these individuals who have sustained excellence and what made them the way they are, and whether it's their family lives and their schooling lives and everything that they did leading up to that very moment where we're speaking. I think that's just one of the coolest things in the world, is to get a chance to learn about those people. And it's why, I don't know about you, and hopefully it's the same moving forward, I don't see any way to ever get tired of having deep, long-form conversations with another person, with the intent of just trying to learn and get to know them better, and hopefully other people can learn as well from us learning in public and publishing those conversations. It's pretty cool that this thing exists, you know.
Yeah, I second your opinion. It works both ways. It's my opportunity to learn and grow, but also pass that knowledge on someone else. And he's the experience, he's what that person's been through, he's the context that I've not been through it, but his context is completely different than mine. I'm not an expert here, but he or she is. Listen to that person and learn from it, because that context aligns with what you've been through and you going through as well. It's a beautiful thing, and 100% with you, Ryan.
Yeah.
There is one tip over there in your book that surprised me, and it took me like, wow, didn't expect to see it there. And I never thought about coaching managers and employees around that particular skill, and that is the power of story. Although 2020, I decided to make it the year of storytelling, and I used Ving Yang and Simon Sinek as my role models, and I call them Goliaths. So somebody who's better than me and I want to get better at something, I put him as a Goliath and facing them and competing with them. I spent a whole year learning how to actually construct these stories and building analogies and looking stories in my own life. But you've put it in the book, and I loved it so much. But I'm curious here, what led you to add something that I haven't seen yet, if I'm honest with you, as an advice for managers?
So again, I tried to write the book that I wanted to have, or I needed to have, when I first got promoted. And since I had some foresight, since I was able to then look back, I analyzed the people who are really compelling for my podcast, as well as the leaders in my life, operators, who were effective at doing the job well. And I thought of a great leader, manager, and current friend of mine named Brian Miller. And Brian was is such an inspiring leader. He opened every single town hall, every one-on-one, every meeting with a story. And so he was constantly reading. He was constantly finding real life events. He would share the story, and you're kind of sitting there. You're really engaged. You're waiting on the edge of your seat. You're like listening, and then you think, how is he going to tie this back to whatever we're doing here at work?
Yeah,
you know what I mean. You ever had guys that were like really good at story like that? And then he was always really good at taking whatever the story was, and it was like random stuff from all different walks of life, and then tying that back to what our mission was at work. And to me, it was a much more memorable way to illustrate the point and inspire me to go do what we needed to do than if he would have just showed like graphs with numbers of
Yes.
like, we have to grow 6% in this particular product. I was worked in sales, right? This product and do that. I'd have been like, okay, you know, whatever. Like that doesn't really inspire me. But instead, I still remember some of the specific stories he told me over a decade ago. And Brian and I now are good buddies. We still talk regularly, where because he started with a story and then ties it back to our mission and applied.
Yes.
Now, this took a lot of work on his part. He had to constantly be on the lookout, jotting them down.
Yes.
He told me he would practice them, he would rehearse, and then he would tell the stories. Versus many others that I've worked with that just kind of came in and said, you know, here are the numbers and here's our growth and here's what we have to do. Okay, let's go do it. And you're like, okay, you know, I got it. And you're fine. That's like business. But that compared to the storyteller who is engaging, a little bit funny, obviously has done work on this and cares deeply enough to try to engage us.
Yeah.
This person, I believe, and my dad has told me from a very young age, this person gives you the best chance, I think, to inspire a group of people towards an objective to achieve. And so from a leadership perspective, it is worth it to work on your skill as a writer, to work on your skill as a speaker, to work on your skill as a communicator as a whole, to work on your skill as a storyteller, if you care to get people to want to commit to your mission versus just complying with your orders because you happen to have a bigger title. This is why, as you know, compliance can be commanded, commitment cannot. You get to choose who to follow. You get to choose who to commit to. Whereas when you have this hierarchy in a business where this person's a manager and this person's the employee who works for them, you kind of have to comply if you want to keep your job. You got to follow the orders. You got to do whatever, but you're going to do enough to just stay compliant.
Yeah.
Versus the leader that you say, Brian Miller, I'm committing to you, man. Like I will follow you. And that gives me to perform at a much higher level, I believe. So my mission with my work, with this book, with future things I'm doing is building a team of committed people versus compliant ones. And that is hard. It takes effort. It takes consistent work. It takes a lot of skill, right? You got to work on yourself. You got to work on a lot of things in order to do that. But that's really the goal. And that's a never-ending process. That's not like you just, okay, we got it. We're here. No, it never ends. But I think that's the fun part. I think that's the part where when you sense you got this committed team, I mean, man, that is awesome. Yeah. That is so fun when you feel the commitment of your team where they are voluntarily choosing to follow you when they could choose to follow other people, and yet they pick you. That's what leadership's all about for me. So I'm all about trying to build commitment over compliance, and I think storytelling, great communication skill is a tool that is a must-have when it comes to that.
No, definitely, because what you've mentioned is you're bringing people emotionally into it, and when people are emotional into something, they then invest it, and they're more likely to follow and commit versus comply, and that's the whole difference here. And I can see how you picked up those skills. You started with the story about the planes and brother rights, but one thing that I've made a note here, I'm always trying to pick one of the most important thing that I've learned from the podcast, and already I've marked it that let's envision how you're starting. Let's envision that and compare it with this. Let's envision this and compare it with that. And I'm sitting here and thinking that works magic on me. And
we all can do it because we all can do it. We all can think of, if you've worked long enough, you can actually envision the person in your mind who you really wanted to commit to versus the one who you complied to because you had a job, you needed the salary, you needed the benefits, right? That's real life. That's the way it goes for most of us. You can envision those two different people. And to me, like that makes it more real. That makes it practical to actually implement, because that makes me want to be this person. It makes me want to be the one that others want to commit to versus the one that I complied to. And I would just say, when you make it real and you can actually envision it, and you kind of start listing the things of the qualities of the leader that you complied to versus the one that you committed to, that to me, I think helps build the types of skills in you to be one of those leaders that others choose to commit to.
Yes. Wow. We need to wrap up because an hour is almost gone. And I just want to add to, before I ask my consistent question that I'm asking at the end of the show, I just add to that point something that you've mentioned, that the leader who's writing it down, that's what it takes. We tend to think there are no stories in my life. My life is boring. It isn't. You just have to look for them intentionally, as you mentioned, make a note. And that's what I've done in the last 2 years, actually. Make a notes, and then story will come in. And one of the stories that came to my mind is I found a lighter in my son is teenager, he's 17 today, he was 15 at the time. Found a lighter in his pocket.
You have a 17-year-old son?
Yes.
How old are you?
39.
God, you look like you're 25. Oh my goodness.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Incredible. Okay, sorry. I didn't mean to. Okay, go ahead.
So I found that lighter there, and it's just something that we all do as a parent. We find something, we have difficult conversations with our kids, but then I stopped, I paused, and I used that story with the lighter when I talk about trust and feedback, and how every conversation either adds or detracts from the shared pool of trust, and how it would make it easier or harder future feedback conversation. And then I shared the examples that Raf a few years ago would start the conversation with my son, and that would be to make him comply with what I want versus build the trust, give him the space, and get him committed towards the right. And that's just the one story. And once you guys start looking for the story in your life and making notes about them, you will find there are plenty of those, and you will be able to connect with skills, with missions, with visions, the way you please, the way you want, and you become memorable for people.
I love it. That's a great one. That's a really good personal one too, which I think always are more memorable as well when it's personal too. I love that.
So the very last question would be, who's the best coach-like leader, Ryan, that you worked for?
I mentioned Brian Miller already. He's one of the best. Dustin Kim is someone I had Dustin on my podcast. I worked for her for only about 18 months, but she has a completely different background than me. Ivy League educated here in the States, top MBA, all that stuff. Things like I have a lower tier MBA, self-educated when it comes to my leadership PhD, which happens to be through a podcast. But anyway, Dustin, I really liked her because she was this great combination of usually the smartest person in every room in which she walked in, yet no ego, and super authentic, not afraid to tell us about the tough things she was going through, both personally and professionally. And that made us trust her and made us want to go to battle with her. It made us want to commit to her and be there for her. I so badly wanted her to look good to her boss. And she was a senior exec reporting up to like the CEO of a huge company. And to me, Dustin's one of the first ones I think of. And I'm still fortunately friends with her to this day, because she also has figured out how to have a great marriage, great kids, and be a senior executive at an awesome company. That's hard to do. That's really hard to do. And I think it's because she just is a trusting, low ego, very compassionate, super intelligent, courageous, confident person. And that I think could, would most anybody would sign up to commit to her any day. And I was just lucky to have a chance to work with her for about 18 months.
Wow, what a great leader, Dustin. Whoa,
yeah, great.
I'm jealous now. I would love to work for a person like that.
Yeah.
Wow, Ryan, thank you so much for your time that you spent with me. I know we can find you on your podcast, the Learning Leaders Show. I know you're quite active on Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Are there any other places we can find you, connect with you, and learn more about you?
Yeah, just learningleader.com is where my home base for everything. So learningleader.com is where you find all that stuff, speaking and the podcast and book writing, stuff like that. So I appreciate the opportunity, man. It was really cool to get a chance to talk with you.
Thank you. Thank you for staying with me. And guys, thank you for tuning in. And the episode will be out in several weeks, guys. So have a great evening on purpose, guys. Thank you.